All right, cool. So Coach Roel here with Patrick. Patrick, how are you doing?
Doing great. How was your holiday?
It was great. It was great. Thanks. And as we're recording this, it's between Christmas and New Year's. So for people watching, Patrick and I were just catching up over the phone. And as he often likes to do, is ask me a whole bunch of questions about money, about financing, investing. So I thought this would be a great topic or a great conversation for us to have on my fledgling new YouTube channel. So Patrick was gracious enough to say, "Cool, let's give it a shot." And so, quick little background: Patrick, congratulations, just got married earlier this year,
Thank
and
you. Thank you.
he's living in the New Jersey area, and just signed the papers literally a few minutes ago, right? Right, Patrick?
Yeah. Yeah, literally
Just
the guy that just got the notary just came over and signed the house away.
Yeah, cool. So that house that you sold was in Austin, and he was messaging me. Patrick was messaging me about what we should do with the money, and so that's kind of like where we started off. And I thought, wait, let's hop on Zoom and let's record this if you don't mind. So I'm sure a lot of people would have very similar questions to Patrick, kind of just starting out, new life, new chapter, sold a house, got a little bit of money. So kind of bring us back. How did you open up this conversation, Patrick?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much to give everyone a kind of little background here. Just like Roel said, me and my wife just got married, and um, we purchased the house back in Austin 2 years ago, and it was kind of one of more of those things that we just decided to do just because we were like, hey, renting is not as good as buying something. So we felt like we're throwing our money away, and we saw obviously a little bit of the idea that the Austin was market was going crazy and things like that. We're like, hey, this maybe this house would appreciate or whatever, and we thought we were going to stay there. So when we first went to Austin, we bought. Well, we actually originally were renting, and then we got 1 year renting there. We decided to buy a house, and in we lived there for about a year, and then we decided to actually come back for to New Jersey. But we left our house over there, and then we decided to actually rent it out just for a little bit to try to see, maybe we can, make up some of the money that we put into it, and maybe we could get some appreciation, things like that. One thing led to another. Unfortunately, this year, our tenants decided to move out in the middle of our lease, and we just decided to sell it. By the blessings of, I don't know, we just got lucky, but the house appreciated tremendously. I mean, we bought this house for $260,000,
Mm-hmm.
and we sold it for $330 cash in two
Nice.
days.
In two
So
days.
yeah, in 2 days, the market in Austin is crazy. We got 28 offers and multiple cash offers. So I mean, we listed the house at 290, and just like I said, sold it for 330. There was even an offer for 340, but it was a financing deal, so it obviously would have taken a little longer to get through. But so we decided to just take the safe route and just do the cash offer at 330. So like Roel mentioned, we just signed the papers, and we're closing officially this week. So it's a pretty exciting thing. With that background, one of the things that I was asking Roel is, what at this point for us is what are we going to do with this money? I mean, for me, from a previous conversation with Roel, he advised me that I should, to pay down all my debt, specifically for me. So that's exactly what I did. Now we are going to be making about, let's give or take, about 50,000 to our name on this house. So that is what I'm trying to figure out what to do with. And my wife has about, give or take, about that much in pending just bad debt, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
A couple credit cards, and then also mostly it's mostly her student loans. So my question to you is, would it be ideal to pay that down first, or would it be better to actually get an investment property that may be able to pay more than what, say, the interest of the loan that she currently has is? What would be the best scenario for us?
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting scenario because as most of these answers go, it all depends, right? So I can see on the one hand, as I was saying before, I can see where you're coming from in terms of wanting to be aggressive and saying, well, you know what, we have all this 50,000 plus cash liquid from the proceeds of this sale. And I know you're really interested in getting into real estate investing. So on the one hand, if you could find something that can actually return um, a greater percentage return than the cost of your bad debts, then you have the asset paying for the debt. But then you still have the debt that's kind of looming over your heads, which uh, quick little, I guess, definition of what a bad debt might be is something that's already been paid for and it isn't necessarily producing you any more income. So student loan, that could be kind of subjective because especially if you were able to finish college, university, and you got a good job because of it, then you could argue that, well, the student loan debt was the one responsible for me being able to get a good paying job. And then that good paying job is what I can use to pay back that student loan debt. So student loan debt, by some people's definition, might be considered a good debt. However, and this is purely, I know it's going to be out of left field for some people, but it's definitely a minority point of view, is student loan debt. Even if you do get that piece of paper, it basically sentences you to a lifetime of having to trade your personal hours for dollars. So I don't really see it as good debt, especially when it's already been spent. Like the tuition has been spent. Good debt is, for example, which I think you already have realized, Patrick, is when you borrow funds to purchase a piece of real estate that then you can rent out to somebody else, and that person pays you more than what it costs you to own that piece of real estate. That's a good debt because that pays you every single month. So academically, and I guess even theoretically, you could say, yeah, if I take that $50,000 and go find an asset or a business, like a piece of real estate or something that can generate me some close to passive income, then I can take that income and pay off my student loan debt. That is definitely one way to go. And it kind of makes sense theoretically, academically, but realistically, there's still the stress of knowing that, oh, I've got all this debt hanging over my shoulders. And what I had suggested just a few minutes ago or about an hour ago was really to take most, if not all, of the proceeds of the sale of that house, and then either put a major dent in paying off those bad debts, the credit card or student loans, or pay it off altogether. Bring your wife's credit score back up to where it looks, decent, attractive to lenders, and then proceed to then re-leverage, meaning go back into good debt, and you could borrow money to purchase investment property. But even then, would have to be done, kind of strategically. So not all rental properties will necessarily be a walk in the park and will be cash flowing from day one. There's a whole other set of skills and knowledge that needs to that's required to be able to invest in real estate profitably. So unfortunately, I know it would sound great to be like, don't pay off that debt, go put your money somewhere and let that thing pay for your debt. But we got to live day to day, and with enough experience seeing other families go through similar stuff at different stages, you can't discount the emotional wear and tear of having a sizable amount of bad debt on your books.
Yeah, no, it's something that's very important. It's one of the things that me and my wife were discussing there. It's like I like to trade stocks, and when in trading stocks, you always talk about mental capital, and it really is just about preserving that psychology and that stress really, and it's very important. It determines your happiness, how you perform in everyday life, and for her especially, this has been, she actually in total, she made a big dent in it, paying this thing down over the years of, having this. She had, I think, a total of maybe 120,000.
Wow.
So it's been looming in the background is a big scary monster that she always thinks about. And I think that, if we're able to just pay this thing off, get rid of it completely, hopefully it'll allow her just to be a little more stress-free and like I said, that'll yield just better performance overall and just like as a much more happiness. So yeah, that's what we're thinking too. Yeah.
Yeah. And for sure. Cause I remember I didn't even finish college university. I don't know if you know that, but
Oh,
I did my darn 4 years, and I think I'm probably still just 2 credits short. That's a whole other thing. But I ended up
really? Oh,
working. Yeah. Ended up working in the industry that I was studying for about a year, got a job where some of the graduates were even jealous of the position that I got.
yeah.
And then I worked in it for a year, and I was like, I kind of don't like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know if you remember that Simpsons episode where they're competing with another kid in
Oh,
mini
yeah.
golf
Yeah.
and mini golf. And then they're at the 18th hole and they're like all this pressure. And then they said, this pressure kind of sucks, right? Like,
Sucks.
yeah, you want to just quit? Yeah, I want to quit. And then they just walk off when all
Yeah.
the TV cameras and the whole crowd. So I just
Yeah.
walked off. It's like, I'm not going to go back and finish my piece of paper.
Hey.
So, and but I still came out with all this student loan debt. Like, for back then, which for you probably was, you weren't even at puberty yet, but
Yeah.
back then it was a lot of money, and I was like, oh my god. But anyways, my point is, once you probably already experienced a bit of this, once you pay off that bad debt, then you free up all that cash flow that you were using to pay that down.
Yeah.
So emotionally, like numbers wise, again, I'll go back, it makes sense to, I guess, theoretically, to say, let's take this cash and invest it in something, and then let that piece of investment pay for my bad debts. Yeah, theoretically. But again, the emotional lifting of stress off your shoulders is going to be like, wow, I've got an extra $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 every so often, to not have to pay down this enormous debt that just feels like it's disappearing into a bottomless pit. To not have to do that anymore and be like, wow, I put away $2,000 from this month's paychecks, and it's still there.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's
Yeah,
huge.
exactly. And that's what I was saying too. It's like, on the flip side, it's like, I feel like the reason like maybe you don't want to pay it off is maybe just a little bit of FOMO, because you feel like you're going to miss out on something.
Yeah.
You miss out on some sort of opportunity. But I think at the end of the day, like, real estate deals are always going to be there, right? So, you'll be able to find, obviously there are unique circumstances where maybe this is like there is a closing time period where you only can get in at this certain time, but I don't know if we're in that type of market. I mean, interest rates are going to be, I think interest rates are going to continue to be lower.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there's always going to be deals. You think about how many houses or pieces of real estate there are in the whole of the United States. There's always going to be a deal at some point. So never feel like you have to jump on a particular deal.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's what we're thinking too. And then on the opposite side as well, it's like, with the income that we're bringing in, that's really going to accelerate, that the savings that we're going to have. Me and my wife, we have really good paying jobs, so we'll be able to bring in maybe like 10 plus over a month in savings, assuming we keep our expenses low. So I mean, we'll be able to make that 50,000 back, by June, July, and that's not too far away. It really isn't too far away.
So even more so now with that knowledge too. Yeah, even more so. Get rid of that debt, celebrate for a little bit, treat yourselves out.
Yeah.
Maybe go on a little road trip somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. I think you should definitely treat yourselves when you hit a certain milestone. Like, that's definitely celebration worthy, to be able to say, finally, no more student loan debt, no more credit card debt. Let's enjoy this for a little bit. Let's spend a little bit.
Not too much.
But not too much, right? Don't go back into debt again.
Yeah, exactly.
But reward yourself for that, so that it makes it all worthwhile. It's something I always tell my wife whenever we complete a deal or a transaction or something major. It's like, let's go out for dinner.
No.
Yeah,
exactly.
Reinforce that.
Exactly. And then the follow-up question I had with this is, like, assuming that's what we did, and and we'll pay off the debt, the second step obviously would be to save, and then after that, we're scouring for deals, or we're trying to figure out where we're going to put our money. And my biggest concern I expressed to you is, I really don't want to mess this up. We've been given kind of the second chance at life, if you will, to kind of get debt free and really start from ground zero again. But now we're a little more equipped with knowledge, but we really don't want to make, we don't want to make the wrong move again. Right. And so my question to you for Roel is, should we buy, a multifamily, or is it one of those things where, I have to convince my wife to where, we're going to buy a house that's maybe because she wants a single family. So she wants a single family and raise some kids. But at the same time, if we spend too much there, we're not going to have as many assets to spend on an investment property. And she's on board with the investment property aspect and, trying to, make money in more lucrative ways and more passive ways. So it's like the give and take from your experience too. Like, I mean, is living in a two family? I know you said you lived in a two family. Is that like, is it ideal? How was it? Can you kind of walk me through that? And, what would you advise?
Again, it's with anything, it largely depends on your preference. Right. One way to go could be well, let's back up just a quick sec. There's a need for you guys to buy your own living space, right? Right. Because currently you're living with family. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah. Been there, done that. And you have an awesome opportunity to save and to decide strategically what your next move is going to be. So I think you're in a great position. Some people feel a little embarrassed about that, but I say, no, screw that. Like, you're saving tons. So that's great. Yeah. And so you can be strategic with your next move, and definitely you've got cash flow and you have savings and all that sort of thing. One way to go, yeah, definitely, is to get a duplex, a side-by-side, or I don't know if in New Jersey, if they allow basement apartments, but some kind of living space where you can rent out another part of the house, especially because you don't have kids yet. There's a lot of space that could be utilized. So in this day and age, for sure, an extra, I don't know how much rents could be, $500, $600, $700, $1,000. I know in Toronto, basement apartments are exceeding $1,000 per month. Mm-hmm. And they're like they're fully self-sustained units, like with a full bathroom and a kitchenette and a wide open space, over $1,000 a month for something that's like half or 2/3 underground. It's kind of crazy. But to the person who owns it, that's an extra $1,000, $1,200 per month that is fairly passive, right? And so that would, what is that?
Subsidized.
It's about $14,400 per year net after taxes. Yeah. And depending on your tax bracket, that could be a gross income of like 19,000 plus. That's a part-time job. Right. Without having to spend part-time job hours working at it. Right. So again, theoretically, that sounds like a great way to go, but then it comes down to, can you guys live like that with a tenant being underneath you or next door? Right. So that's another question too. And my wife and I did that, and we actually were quite excited because we were in a very similar situation. We didn't have kids yet, and we were planning to. But then when we bought a house, we found ourselves in a position living with family, looking to buy a house. And I was like, well, we want to buy a house and we can afford this much, but we really don't need all this space. So while we're, and even when we do have the first 1 or 2 kids, they're going to be really small. They're not going to take up a lot of space. And as long as we have like a 3-bedroom to ourselves, that's plenty for like our bedroom, a home office, and then a kid's room, a nursery of some sort. We'd have a whole basement, and that's exactly what we did. So we rented out our basement, renovated the entranceway. That was our first foray into renovations, and managed that, and then managed a tenant. Sure, they were underneath our feet and we couldn't stomp around and make tons of noise all the time, but it was a small sacrifice to get our feet wet into the whole real estate game. Wow. So that's one way. Another, probably less, I would think that a less attractive way is purchase your own home. but realize that your house is not an asset because it's net negative cash flow, right? You got to pay the mortgage. Even if you had no mortgage, you think about it, you've got property tax, utilities, maintenance and repairs. It's still going to be a net negative. So it's
Right.
meaning it's money coming out of your pocket. You want to be able to get something that puts money into your pocket, net after all expenses and all that.
Right.
But that could be a way to go, is if the emotional factor outweighs the numerical or financial factors, then you might want to have your own space, the privacy to be able to start growing your family. That could be one way to go. Don't necessarily spend all of your borrowing power, your credit, your down payment, but leave some for an investment property. And unfortunately, you're in New Jersey, so investment properties for long-term rentals are going to be that can cash flow with like a minimal down payment. I think 20% is still the law in the state for an investment property. It's going to be kind of hard to find something that cash flows positive with 20% down in the Jersey area.
Yeah, definitely what we found. It's not easy to find a cash flowing house over here in Jersey. It's very, very expensive. Taxes included, everything. So yeah, it's one of those things that I'll have to have a conversation with my wife with, because it's from my experience, my wife is very very emotional about these things, a house and things like that. And we've been moving multiple times, so it's kind of one of those things where you just want to kind of just settle down. We feel like we're kind of nomads. We always have our stuff, especially, I mean, we're still living not even in our own house. And, we have a bunch of boxes downstairs. We don't even know what clothes we have. We don't know what Christmas decorations we have. We're buying Christmas decorations currently for our future home. So it's like everything's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's just, one of those things that she's I feel like very emotionally tied to in regards to settling, and a conversation that I think we'll have to be where, you can kind of settle maybe in a 2-family. I mean, and that's why I wanted to kind of get to know a little more about your experience with that. Like, did you have ever any problems you felt, or did your wife have any resistance to doing the 2-family, just starting off, or nothing like that?
No, not at all. And that's what I was going to touch upon. A comment is, the most important thing is that you guys are on the same page. I'm not a qualified marriage counselor or anything like that, but I found I think it's common knowledge that not a lot of people necessarily bring up all the time, is as long as you two are on the same page and you can come to get behind the same vision as to what your 2, 3, 5, 10-year plan is going to be, then you can take anything that life throws at you. So I would really suggest that talk about the crazy ideas as well, because that's how I ended up relocating my family, because we already had 2 kids when we were living in Toronto. We ended up relocating down to Orlando, Florida. And I think by now my wife is a little annoyed when I bring up too many of these what if scenarios, because it ends up turning into some major life change, because we ended up relocating to a foreign country. But the way I brought that one up, I said, just imagine, suppose, what if we were to do this? Just as a crazy idea. It's like, we don't have to do it. It's whatever. Let's just brainstorm and let's talk it through. Yeah. I mean, it's free. It's fun to dream. And if you find that we're going down a path that's uncomfortable and it's like, no, if we're never going to do that, we can stop, but dare to dream for a sec, at the very least you can, it's better than watching Netflix for an hour. You just have a conversation with your life partner for an hour and say, well, if we didn't have to do this, what would you really love to do? What even if it doesn't sound logical, have those conversations. You're in that transitionary period anyways, and you got to be strategic about it. Who knows? Relocating to a different locale. Like, I mean, for me, the Toronto market compared to the greater Central Florida market is just night and day. Like I posted on my social media at one point, here's what $1 million house looks like in Toronto. And it was, I think, just like a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, single level, partial basement, big lot, but it was a tiny, less than I think it was less than 1,000 square feet for $1 million in Toronto
That's crazy.
in the 416 area code, like Toronto proper. And then what $1 million converted to US looked like in terms of a listing that was
Yeah.
on the MLS at the time. And it was just like, this was a mansion. It was like a tropical mansion compared.
Yeah.
So it just helped me reinforce the fact that for our little family, we made a good decision to move down here. It ticked off a bunch of boxes. Like we always wanted to be where it was warm. I had grown up shoveling snow as a kid, child labor and stuff. And I thought, you know what, someday I'm going to move to where it's warm and it doesn't have to be when you're quote unquote old. It can be preferably when you're young and you can actually enjoy it. So
Yeah. No,
have those crazy conversations. It's free to dream.
yeah. No, we try to do that, it's and that's how you kind of, get into doing those things that seem impossible. You kind of just start by thinking of an idea and you start breaking it down. It's like, how can this even be achieved?
Mm-hmm.
And, for us, like, I was going to ask you too, is like, what, before you decided to do the 2 family, did you also have a plan for what the next thing was? Like, was that a part of the convincing to your significant other as to, we're going to live here for 2 years or 3 years, and then we're going to move on to another thing? Like, did you guys have a plan before that, and then if so, like, what did that kind of look like? And did that come into fruition?
We had a couple of possibilities, and another big, I guess, strategy that I like to share with people is put yourself in the position where you have the option, where you have a few options. You don't necessarily have to take the option once you get there, but it's better to have the option and not take it rather than want to have the option and it's not available to you. If that makes sense. So we didn't have a linear plan. It's like, it makes sense to make this our next move, is to buy a house where we can rent out the basement for additional income. And then from there, we could either, let's say in 2 to 5 years, we can refinance. Hopefully the place will appreciate. We'll fix it up. We'll add value to it while we're living there. And then refinance it within 2 to 5 years, pull the money out and use that for investing, or refinance it to move into a bigger house that is just our own, or maybe another one that has another basement apartment that could also be rented out, but for hopefully more rental income. So we set out that once we go into this next move, how many options does that give us after that? And that's about as far as we thought of it. I didn't think of it. Then we moved there and where we're going to go, because then it could go branch off into an infinite number of timelines or directions. But yeah, you said putting ourselves into this next position would then give us at least 2 or 3 additional exciting options. But those can, take 2 to 5 years for us to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's, I think it's in for us too. It's like, I guess, an education as to like what those options would even be. So you kind of have to look into the one thing I was going to ask you too. I gotta try to get your book. Your book.
Oh, I thought you had it already.
No, I don't have it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can order it on Amazon. I'll put the link.
I know. I gotta order it on Amazon.
And the next time I see you, I'll sign it or whatever.
Yeah. No, that'd be really, really cool. Yeah, I'm trying to we were just trying to think, like, what's gonna be that the next best move for us. And like I said, I mean, that's what we're thinking. We just really don't want to make that wrong move. So I mean, that was definitely really insightful. The other question too I had, I guess, was when you're looking for I guess a duplex, are there any like key things that you're kind of looking for in a specific, maybe market or the house itself? Did you convert this house into a duplex? Was it already a duplex, or how did that kind of work out?
Well, the one that we found that we ended up purchasing was it already had a basement apartment, but the entrance was not very good. Like it was like a double glass French door kind of thing. So we replaced it with a proper door that could lock with a proper key, and it's more secure. So it looked more presentable to a tenant. But yeah, it's either way. You could find something that you can convert. You'd also have to make sure that you estimate how much budget that's going to cost you to get, ideally have a separate entrance created for the other unit. It shouldn't be hard to have a couple of handymen to quote you on that, how much that would cost you. But yeah, we found one that was partially done. We just kind of improved upon it. And sorry, what was the other part of your question?
No, I was just saying, like other details as to like how do you possibly look for a good like duplex to invest in?
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Well, the simple short answer is that it has to cash flow.
Right.
And how do you make sure that it cash flows? Well, you got to find out what the market rent is for the place. It's not going to necessarily cash flow because you're living in one of the units, if
Right.
that's the route you're going to go. But which is why it's also a good first step if you have that option available to you, because you don't have to worry so much if it's going to cash flow, because it's dual purpose, right? You guys are going to live in one unit and then rent out the other one.
Right.
So the rule of thumb I'll give you is the first couple of rules I always teach in real estate investing. Rule number one is to make money in the buy. Rule number two is have a plan to add value. So make money in the buy, add value. That's rules one and two. Make money in the buy, meaning you buy it at a discount. So good for you that you sold your house in Austin in a bidding war and you got top dollar for it. But on the other end, when you're looking to purchase as an investment, you never want to get into a bidding war, because then you're always going to overpay.
Right.
Or, well, not always, but more than likely you're going to end up overpaying if you're going to do a bidding war. So make money in the buy. You need to find someone who's willing to trade time for dollars. Meaning, if you can close quickly on my property, which is a problem for me as the seller, I'm willing to give you a discount. So it's a fair exchange. You're not looking to take advantage of anyone by giving them a lowball offer. You're basically saying, I can give you a quick out, Mr. or Mrs. Seller. I can help take this problem property off of your hands quickly if you're willing to be flexible with the price.
Right.
So, and you're never going to be coercing them or anything like that. So they can say yes or no. And if they say yes, then that means, okay, I'd rather give up some of the money in return for taking this property off my hands quickly. So that's always rule number one. That's the ideal situation that you want to get. Make money in the buy. And then there has to be an ability for you to be able to add value to the property, whether it's converting a single family home and legally or as legal as possible. You know, I know not every real estate investor does a legal second unit, but that's the risk that they want to take. But ideally, a legal second unit that's okayed by the city. What's the cost of that? That's a value add, because now you're turning a single family home into something that partially produces an income. So whereas your mortgage might be $1,500 plus per month, well, if I invest another $8,000 in converting part of the house into an income suite or income unit, I could generate $500-$600. So now my net is maybe $1,000 or so out of pocket, because you have that income.
Right.
So I would say that the first two parameters: make money in the buy and add value. Have a plan to add value on it.
Yeah. And then diving deeper into, I guess, to the added value aspect, you know, for someone who's not as experienced, you know, I guess we don't really know too much as to like how to add value, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of where we're at. And we look at homes that are kind of distressed, and it's like, what can we really add here, and how much value does this actually add to where you could justify it, you know? And I think that has something to do with maybe like there's also factors of like where the market, like where the house is actually located. You know, you can't have like I mean, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have like really nice things in a bad area, they're not maybe as valued as high as maybe in nice things in a nicer area. I don't
Right.
know if that's the right thing to say, but that's just my thought. I don't know if you can say something about that.
Yeah, that's a good point because there's actually quite a lot of moving factors in real estate investing. So to comment on at least a little bit on what you were talking about, rule of thumb is you want to get the worst property on the nicest street, never the opposite. You don't want to have the nicest property on the worst street because then you're the one who's then taxed with trying to lift the entire neighborhood's value up.
Mm.
You want to be the guy who's straggling behind everybody else,
Yeah.
where it's a nice neighborhood and all the neighbors are like, oh my gosh, I wish someone would buy that vacant property down the street. It's killing my real estate prices. So when you roll in and you're like, they see you renovating, they see a big dumpster outside, for example, and you're clearing it out, the neighbors are going to pass by and they're like, great, good for you. Hope you really do well at this project, because they're thinking it's going to help improve their property values.
Yeah.
So you want the worst property on the nicest street. That's kind of like a rule of thumb in that sense. In terms of add value, it just comes with like experience. You've read a bunch of books. Cosmetic repairs are the best: painting, flooring, landscaping. Those are the ones that you'll get your biggest return on. You don't want to redo the electrical or repipe the plumbing because that's all behind the walls. A new seller or an appraiser isn't necessarily gonna value that as anything more than what you put into it. Like if you spend $2,000 on repiping an entire property, an appraiser, you tell that to the appraiser, you show them the invoices, they're just going to say, okay, well, I'll just put $2,000 extra. Whereas you always want to get a greater return than what you put into it.
Right.
So a coat of paint, for example, on the outside will refresh a whole property. It might cost you $2,000-$3,000 depending, but it might make the whole house look totally brand new and add $10,000-$15,000 to the curb appeal, the list price.
Wow.
So cosmetic repairs is usually the biggest thing. And
Okay.
of course, if you can put a renter in there, or even if it's like, doesn't even have to be a renter. It could be like you have a storage shed in the back. You could rent that out as storage space to somebody else who's got like, I don't know, some equipment or electrician or something like that. Think outside the box, right? With additional space you can rent out.
Yeah, I always get weary, I guess, because just like you kind of said with some real investors on how they legally don't make something a two family. Is it like frowned upon, or what is actually the negative of doing that? Because I like I'm just taking like a room or the basement, and you have a separate entrance to the basement, and you just renting that out. Is that frowned upon, or is it bad? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's there's because this is going to be out there on the interwebs.
Yeah.
Got to be kind of careful how I word this. The level of risk is an individual decision.
Okay.
So there are markets where, for example, in Toronto, the Greater Toronto area, it's just so when people come to Canada, they tend to think of either Toronto or Vancouver first. So there's so many immigrants coming in to Toronto that they're having difficulty putting them all in places. And then when they start to buy houses or they need to move out from living with their initial family members, there's just this demand for both rent and purchasing real estate. So what a lot of people have been doing is started to convert their basement or part of their house into like a rental. And there are certain laws around that, right? So again, it depends on the individual and how much they feel like if you're going to have 10 people, if you turn the living room, the dining room, you turn the master bedroom into two different rooms and you're renting out 10 rooms and you basically are running a rooming house, that's too much risk for me because then the electrical and the plumbing is only meant for one family. And if you've got 8 to 10 plus adults, all utilizing the systems there, there's only so much it can hold, and that could be a fire hazard, safety hazard, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a certain point that the individual has to say, well, I'm willing to take on that risk, or ideally you want to do everything by the book. But if you don't do everything by the book, then you got to pick and choose which risks do I want to take by not necessarily getting everything permitted. That's just the reality of it. On the surface, I got to say you should do everything by the book and legally and by the city. But I do know friends of mine who don't necessarily always do it by the book. So, and again, that's going to be an individual decision that you got to make. It's the risk reward. Decide on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I know, for example, in another market I was looking at, that when I researched it, they said that a person from the city would not be allowed, cannot forcibly enter a person's residence unless they got permission from the homeowner. So even if a neighbor, for example, reported the offending or the allegedly offending person, if someone from the city came knocking on the door and said, we got a report that you have an illegal rental suite here, can we come in and inspect it? If you say no, they can't force their way in. They can't bring the police or anything. They'll be like, oh, okay, well. So there's certain, that's where you have to be. That's what I mean by you have to make a decision for yourself. Right? What's the risk of what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Right. And
I always say that it's just interesting because I always just my brother-in-law, he watches these guys on YouTube. They're like these like really wealthy Vietnamese nail salon owners, and they have these like homes that they pretty much house like the Vietnamese nail salon workers in.
Yeah.
And there's like multiple rooms that they're just renting out, and I'm just like, is this even allowed? Like, I don't
That's
even.
That's funny you say that, because that's amongst my Viet friends. That's kind of like a funny stereotype. Yeah, totally. I know a couple of families that follow that exact same business model. They got a chain of multiple nail salons, and they bring over people from the motherland, and they house them, and they kind of make money on both ends. They're both the employees, and they got to pay rent at the same time.
I know. It's so. I guess in theory, that would be like illegal.
Yeah, not in theory. It is. But again, it's the risk that the individual manages. Is worst case scenario, if someone's going to lose their life, then it's like, that's a risk I don't want to take. But it's like, I'm just renting out a room in my home, and it happens to, we renovate it so it has an exterior door. There's $300-400 you can rent to a single person, or maybe a young couple just starting out. That's not a huge risk for me.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not necessarily something that it's not like I'm turning my home into an apartment building. It's just, that's the sign of the times. And I think if it came down to it, if the city found out about it, it's like, what do you want me to do? I lost my job in this pandemic and whatever. I'm renting out a room just to make ends meet for a little bit, cut me a break. So I can see where that gray area is.
Yeah. Does it cost a lot to actually like legally convert something to a 2-family?
It depends, market to market.
Yeah.
But what I found is in most markets, it's not that difficult. You just ask the person at the city planning desk, or you call up and you say, what are the rules for this? That's what a lot of these civil workers are there for. They're there to help explain what the rules are and what you need to comply, and the permits and whatever. So it's just a little bit of, homework that you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. That definitely makes sense. Look, I this other question that just came up. I know we were talking about it before, but it's in regards to where, aside from, buying on the nicest, the most distressed property on the nicest street, specifically in New Jersey, it's hard to find properties like we were talking about, and to where it makes sense, like financially, right? We have a certain budget that we want to meet. We want to make sure that we're not overstepping our finances to where we're house poor. We want to make sure that we're going to be able to still have money on the side just in case scenarios or if other opportunities come about. So in the case of New Jersey, you know, when you're looking at like a $250,000 house, it's a lot different when you're looking in Texas, 250,000, because a $250,000-$60,000 house in Texas, which is what we purchased, is a brand new home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything, you know, you get the granite countertops, the tile floors, you know, the 10-foot ceilings, everything you could ever ask for. In New Jersey, it's like it's falling apart, baby.
Right.
You know, you gotta do this, you gotta redo this, and the roofs needs to replace, windows, the wooden windows, there's just a bunch of stuff you still have to do. So in order to meet like a, say for example, like a 250 mark for us, you know, we'll have to go to places that maybe aren't so favorable. And, you know, would you like, is that, you know, should we be looking in those areas? You know, maybe as just because like it only fits our certain finances, or obviously safety comes into play. We're growing our kid, you know, like our family, or should we just save our money and try to really, I guess we have to invest in something that's more, you know, expensive, you know, just that it's just the nature of the beast over here. So what would you say about that?
Well, again, I'll start off with the famous "it depends," but I want to kind of take it from a couple angles, but I do have to go and get my wake up my kids for a nap and take them out for a walk. It's like I have puppies; they're 6 and 4 years old. And they're going to be bouncing off the walls soon, and if I don't get them soon, they're going to come knocking on my door, saying that it's past they're supposed to wake up. But anyways. One thing I want to mention too is that we're going off of the assumption that you have to buy a place.
Right.
I want to plant the seed that a potential interim solution could be that you could rent a nice place, especially once you pay off all your debts. You'll have to be flush with cash flow. You could rent in a reasonably good area, probably even your ideal area for the meantime, and hopefully still be able to save up money and then improve your credit scores. And that's another thing too I've been wanting to mention from before is during this time, once you pay off your bad debts, your remaining bad debts, is strategically build up the amount of credit available to you. Like apply for credit cards every so often, ask for increases on your limits, make sure you don't use them, but and definitely don't keep balances on them, but try to build up as much credit available to you, unsecured credit, like signature line of credit. I don't know if they call it in New Jersey, signature lines. In Canada, they call it a line of credit, where it's basically just based off of your promise to pay back. It's not attached to any collateral or anything. So while you are in that box where a banker would look at you and, oh, hello, Mr. Patrick and Miss So-and-so, and let me see your pay stubs. Oh, you've got employment history. You've got great credit. You've got good pay stubs. You fit into this box that the banker will just salivate over, because the banker gets paid bonuses, or their part of their quota is to sell people credit lines, is to get certain credit cards, mortgages, loans approved. So as long as you look attractive, say, give it all to me. Give me as much as you can, as much as you can possibly give me. Because if and when the day comes when one or both of you want to quit your day jobs, you're no longer going to be privileged to have that, to fit in that box. You're going to be in the self-employed world, where they're going to scrutinize you and avoid you like the plague.
Right.
So as long as you are a in the box employee, then get as much credit as they could possibly give you in anticipation of being an investor in the future.
Interesting. And you just go to the bank for that.
Yeah. It's like every 3 to 6 months, you ask for increases on your existing credit cards. When you get these pre-approved, pre-qualified in the mail, call them up and find out, is it going to be a hard pull on my credit, or do I just have to say yes? And then you're going to give me $1,000 credit card and it doesn't cost me anything. So those kinds of things, collect those like trading cards, because you'll definitely, once your knowledge increases, and if you're going to be getting into like flipping or buying distressed assets, you're going to want to have that credit facility available, like on a moment's notice, literally.
That makes sense.
So that's something you can prepare for over the next, and I'm still constantly doing it. I did start it way back when, and it's just a normal part that I'm always looking for these offers. If an institution wants to give me line of credit, then I'll look at, is it going to be a hard pull? And if I have to pay an annual fee, if the answer is no and no, then I'll be like, yeah, have at it. Let's give it to me.
Interesting.
That being said, also another option is for you to, like I said, potentially rent for a year or two, so that you do have that emotional brain space where you're not living with family in such close quarters. You can live in a nice neighborhood. You could do that, but also knowing that you're building up your savings and you're building up your credit to really make a strategic investment move of some sort. So that's another possibility, right? Mm-hmm. And as I said before, if you just go the route of purchasing your own home, well, you're basically putting another strain on your finances, right? Because your house is not an asset when you're the one who has to pay principal, interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance. All of that is cash going out of your pocket, unfortunately, right? And then another possibility, if you're going to buy a place, again, going back to what I said before, is brainstorm or dare to dream. What if we lived in somewhere else, another place in the US, or maybe even outside the US? Like, if that is something that's even on your wife's radar, who knows? But the cost of living is exactly why I left Toronto. Cost of living is ridiculous. It's like, even though people may have equity in their homes of like 500, 800,000, a million plus, they still only have one home. And it's about this big. And it's costing them like so much money every single month. And the quality of life is ridiculous. And I don't mean to poo-poo it, because probably my friends who live in Toronto are going to see this at some point too. But I mean, I used to sit on the highway an hour to an hour and a half each way, once in the morning, once in the evening, and thinking, what's the use of this 2 to 3 hours? Where is this going to? That's why I was listening to audiobooks and whatever, and saying, there's got to be a better way. And so I entertained the idea of, well, what if you actually moved? What would you want to do when you're quote unquote old and retired? That's a question to ask yourself. And then you talk about that with your wife and be like, okay, that sounds cool. So why do we have to wait till we're old to do that? Why can't we do that like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Right.
No, well, then you entertain that idea. Because I mean, you just gotta kind of take the blinders off for a bit and say, here's what I used to tell people. Wouldn't it be cool if ... Wouldn't it be cool if we lived here? Wouldn't it be cool if we started this kind of business? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then just kind of have that conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
So I do need to go. Actually, someone literally just rang my doorbell. You and I can reconnect offline off of this. But for now, I think that was really great. Thanks for being a guest on my fledgling new YouTube channel, Patrick.
You're welcome. Thank you, Roel, for answering all my questions. I really appreciate it.
All right, cool. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, bye.
Okay, bye.